welcome to 100 Huntley Street. This is a great week. We are talking about that final week in the life of Jesus known as Holy Week. And later you're going to have a really interesting conversation with a guy I think people know, Bear Grylls, who's known for all of his crazy outdoor adventures.
Yeah, one of the probably the most famous adventure, like hardcore risk taker in the world, I would think.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the adventure that he took on internally. So that's going to be a conversation that you're going to flesh out. He has this show called The Island, and I hadn't really heard a lot about it, so I was kind of checking out clips on YouTube. And do you watch Survivor at all, or do you know about that show?
I used to watch it all the time. I was so addicted.
Okay, so I thought Survivor was like, wow, that's the craziest show on television, until you start watching clips of The Island, and it is like a whole other level. Like, there is nothing. There's sharp cliffs, and these guys are just hanging off the edge of them. They could fall to their deaths. There's no washroom. Food is really hard to get a hold of. And people sign up for this on purpose.
Wow.
So I have a question for you. Because you travel the world, you've been in some really uncomfortable situations. We've all had those bathroom issues when we travel.
By meaning that, you mean no bathroom. Let's clarify. When you say bathroom issues, you mean like there's no bathroom?
Yeah, a little bit of both.
Okay, that sounds a little better. Okay, yeah, well.
So would you do a show like this? Do you think that you have what it takes to survive the island?
You know what? There was a time in my life where I think I would have said yes to that.
Yeah.
Like when I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, like that season of my life, because I did endure some hard things. Like I got altitude sickness and all kinds of things. So that was a hard season, but and it was rewarding. And you and I have faced things: no running water, no electricity, no bathrooms. Like but cliff climbing, falling off cliffs, I don't know. That might be a little extreme for me. How about you?
Yeah. Humanity, we're a different creature for sure, because we've spent millennia learning how to live indoors, put a roof over our head, have plumbing, toilets that flush. But then we get this kick out of going into the outdoors where we have nothing, and like people who love to go camping, they love to sleep on the floor. They like to forage through the forest, and God bless them. But
I'm getting a no. I'm feeling no from you.
When I'm at home with a bowl of chips and my Coke Zero, I'm like, oh, I could totally do this. I don't know what these people are complaining about.
That's the height of luxury, Joe. Coke Zero and a bowl of chips.
Yeah. Oh, I'm judging these people 7 ways to Sunday, thinking, I can't believe you can't do this.
Why are you crying? What's wrong with you?
But I think it would be really difficult to do, because I was recently in the Dominican Republic and they didn't have hot water, and I felt like a hero for the faith because I showered with cold water.
Joe, how many cold showers have we taken around the world? Like, a lot of places have no option for hot water.
That's true. That's true.
You're speechless. You're speechless. Okay, I agree with you, though. We do sit on our couches. We do judge people for not being sacrificial enough, but it's also a mind game. That's what I learned climbing Kilimanjaro. Like, it is more mind than it is body. Yeah. And that's depression, that feeling all alone, like that is a big part of winning that game. That's, I think, what Bear Grylls is really good at.
Yeah, I mean, I think we get so used to our creature comforts, having our sofas and our Wi-Fi and all of that, and it would be a lot of sacrifice to have to give all that up. And, it's interesting because all this week we're talking about sacrifice, the biggest sacrifice where Jesus steps out of heaven into earth and he joins humanity. So we're talking about going from the cross to the crown, all week. And in a few moments, you're going to have a conversation with someone who's really known for their radical outdoor lifestyle. But what a lot of us may not know about is the radical inward life, transformation that took place on the inside. And his name is Bear Grylls. Cheryl, you can have that conversation next. And I don't know about you, but it's going to be an adventure. Stay with us.
Join 100 Huntley Street for Holy Week as we journey from the cross to the crown. With special guest reality TV survivalist Bear Grylls and former football player Tim Tebow, you'll be inspired by the conversations, reflections, and music.
If you love risk, thrills, and adventure, then you're likely very familiar with multiple award-winning TV host, author, and survivalist Bear Grylls. He was one of the youngest people to climb Mount Everest, but his accomplishments don't stop there. This former 21 SAS soldier has crossed the North Atlantic in an open inflatable boat, set a record paramotoring over the Himalayas, and achieved a Guinness World Record for the longest indoor free fall. To name just a few of his accomplishments, he's also the host of many TV shows, including Man vs. Wild, Running Wild with Bear Grylls, and You vs. Wild, as well as a best-selling author of many books selling more than 20 million copies. There's so much more I could say, but today we are here to talk about his latest adventure, which he says is the hardest thing he's ever done. Welcome, Bear.
Hey, nice to be with you. What a nice introduction. Thank you. You could also add, I struggle a lot at many things. And I don't know, I think sometimes we have the highlights put forward, don't we? But behind it, there's many failures as well, is what I would say, and many struggles.
That's why
we're in the fight, still smiling, standing.
That's why our families and friends keep us humble, right? Because they actually know the real truth.
That's true. That's true. And I think that the kind of danger of TV is it's kind of not letting that shine. But actually, it's important to lead with that because it's real life, isn't it? You know, so, I mean, look at this interview. There's only one person here who's looking sweaty and scruffy. You look amazing. It should be a little note to myself. I could turn the dial up a little bit.
I had a lot of help this morning, and you are completely in character. So I think it's working. But I do want to talk about this amazing book because it's so surprising to me. You've done so many crazy things, like hard things. And you said this is one of the hardest things you've ever done. So why?
Yeah, I think because it's different, isn't it? This isn't climbing mountains or crossing oceans. This is trying to articulate the greatest love story we'll all ever experience, you know, and what's changed my heart so much and what's helped me so much over the years, and trying to sort of write the story of Christ in a way that is really as it was when he walked the earth, you know, powerful and personal, intimate and freeing and empowering, and trying to sort of deconstruct the many experiences that people have of, you know, religion and church as such. That isn't always positive. And certainly for myself, it was like that. I was a product, I suppose, of thousands of years of religion, you know, doing a pretty good job of sanitizing and in many cases ruining the beautiful story of Jesus, you know. And for me, it's been a lifetime of unraveling that and to find that the person and the real story, you know, it's why I've called it the greatest story ever told. It's not like could be the greatest story, you know. If this is true, it changes everything. You know, it changes all our lives, our futures, our hope, our confidence, our approach to life and relationships and risk. So that's why it was hard. I didn't want to screw it up.
I understand that when you're doing something that really matters to your heart, the pressure is there. And, you know, you referenced your own journey. I think this has kind of been something for you that you actually had faith and kind of lost it from, I would say, cultural Christianity, like the traditions that sometimes we can have, but it doesn't really impact our heart. Can you just unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's right. First of all, on the pressure, no pressure, no diamonds. I say it was the hardest thing. It was also the best thing I've ever done. And out of all the things in my life, I've never had a response to anything close to the scale of what this book has done. You know, the TV shows have been a privilege and I love them. I still do them. It's my day job. But I've never done anything that's come close to the response that this elicits in people from, you know, I get people writing to me from every culture, every country, every faith. You know, I get Muslims and Hindus and atheists from all over the world, and they all kind of say the same thing, which, you know, I knew about the Bible, but I'd never read it. But I had no idea of the real story of Jesus, you know, so that's that. But in terms of my kind of journey, it's kind of been the same as well. I mean, as a young kid, I had a really natural faith. You know, I just knew something was out there and it was good. You know, it wasn't more complicated than that. And then I suppose I went to school. I went to a very formal school where we had formal chapel every day. Half of the services were in Latin. The people were always wearing white cassocks. And I just thought, wow, this is God, you know, and I've got this wrong. And what I had as a child was childish. And this is what it is. And I threw it all out. I threw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And as I say, it's been a lifetime of unraveling and to realize actually that kid had it right, you know, and And Jesus is for us. He's not judging, and he's like, he came to free us. I mean, one of my favorite lines he ever said was, "I came to seek and save the lost." That's me. I'm a lost boy. I'm a proud lost boy. And it's been a journey. I'm still on it, but I know where to draw my strength from in life now, and that's changed everything.
I think this book, for me, reading it, it's very emotional. You really tapped into the emotions of each of the people who was interacting with Jesus. Like, what would it be like to be a mom? What would it like to be his best friend? And I really love that. And I think, thousands of years of tradition, like we read the Bible, we've heard so many people who grew up kind of in a cultural Christianity maybe have heard these stories their whole life. But you did something different. What do you think kind of unpacking or kind of getting rid of maybe the traditional reading of it and actually making it like these were real people living these events?
Well, it's funny because, like, as you say, so many of us know the stories. We grew up with the story of the Nativity or the crucifixion or the Good Samaritan. We know stories, but actually the whole story is so incredible, and the ultimate story of adventure and friendship and risk and rescue and sacrifice and laughter and freedom. And, that was very far from the sanitized, meek and mild version of Jesus that I'd experienced from a distance growing up. So, and actually a pastor wrote to me the other day. He said, I had no idea when I opened this book. I thought, this would be another book. And then he goes, it's genius because it's like John Grisham's being tasked with writing the Jesus story. And that's kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell it as it is, like this incredible, like, love story and thriller. And, the Bible can be hard for people. I know once you have a faith, it's like milk and honey. But it can be hard to read if you're just coming blind. And so I wanted to write this book as it is, as this sort of, ripper, just short chapters, theologically 100% accurate. That was one thing that was really important. I didn't change a single word that Jesus said. We used many different translations and, but putting that timeline together, we didn't want to change a single word he said. We sort of build the story around it. And I think and the other interesting bit is that I've done it from 5 different perspectives of those who knew him best. And that's kind of because it's all of our stories wrapped up in his story, So whether we're the cynic, or whether we're the angry, or whether we're the impulsive or the lost, it's like all of our stories wrapped up in this. And I don't know. I actually feel this book's outgrown me now. It's like I almost don't feel it's mine any longer. It's got a life of its own. It's changing lives every day. If I want to be known for one thing at the end of my life, I would say it's this, the adventures and everything. As I say, I still do, and I love, and it's a privilege. But I kind of feel God's given me a platform to be able to speak with authority about this story and about what's really helped me in many deserts, jungles, and mountains. And the answer is found in the story of Christ.
One of the things I really loved learning more about you, Bear, is that you're known, as a really tough guy. I mean, you climbed Mount Everest 18 months after you had a parachuting accident and broke your back in 3 places. You're one of the youngest people in the world to do it. And you've accomplished so much. And so, as you said at the beginning, you're kind of known as this tough guy who can push through so many things that many of us would give up trying to do because we're uncomfortable, we're cold. And, you talk about that persistence, but you say that you've learned to depend on God, that you actually need him every day, that that you live this life of dependence, or you aim to live this life of dependence. Talk to me about the tension between, accomplishing and, you're a very disciplined person, and then also recognizing that we need God every day.
Well, it's not a tension for me. It's just an awareness of where am I going to draw my strength from. And a lifetime in the outdoors has taught me that on my own, I'm not strong. I'm just, none of us are. It's like the hand and the glove, the glove on its own has no power. The glove needs a hand. And in life, we're like that. And I think it's easy when everything's going great and everything's sunny. It's easy to think that you don't need anything. But I think many times I've been taken to the edge, whether it's in high mountains or big oceans, and again, I've learned that I just want to draw from a deep well, and it's one of the beautiful bits in this story of Christ is, he talks so often about living water and the bread of life. And also what an incredible survivor he was, even that time in the desert in 40 days, it's like, I know we have this such different view of Christ often, don't we? But I think that's what I'd say is I've just learned to lean on the beautiful presence of Christ within and not try and do it all on my own. And on our own, we're not very strong.
I think it's just incredible that you have that perspective. I mean, you spent time with some of the most well-known people on earth, including former President Obama. You've spent time with actress Julia Roberts in the wild, Prime Minister Modi, and there's this moment as well where you actually pray for former President Obama. Tell me about that.
Well, that was like, we've just wrapped up season 9 of Running Wild. The show's been such a sort of privilege for me to get to take some of these amazing people out into the outdoors. And as you know, the outdoors is a great leveler. I mean, you've climbed some mountains in your life. It's often a humbling place. And I think what I love about, the outdoors and Running Wild is that it doesn't judge, it just empowers you. It asks some questions. You have to work hard. You have to face some fears, but it changes us for the better. And I see it all the time, taking these actors and superstars out. But I think the Obama one was special. I mean, that, he was the sitting president at the time, and, sort of regardless of one's politics, it's a privilege to be able to stand alongside people of power and influence and try and speak love and light into their world and what they do. And it was just a moment at the end of our journey together where I just felt, here's a guy who's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. It was actually off camera. And I just said, we'd had a really, special journey together. And I said, can I pray for you before you go? And one of the cameramen just had the camera on, had it low and just recorded it. And we weren't going to put it in, but we did in the end. And it was a really sort of beautiful bit at the end of the show. But it's been interesting since, it's like even Prime Minister Modi of India. I mean, when I did the journey with him, he'd seen it. He'd seen that. He said, we should pray at the end of our journey. And I like it. I went, we'll pray. That's good. We'll pray. And I don't know. It's like, it's a humble and rare thing actually in life for people to pray together. It doesn't happen often. I know in your world, especially, you're surrounded by that, but I'm not. And it's rare. And it's a long journey for people to kneel down. In our lives, metaphorically, not just physically, it's a difficult journey, but it's bonding and it's beautiful. And again, it's a reminder, where do we get our strength from? And it brings people together. And I love that. So actually, I mean, even today, somebody came up to me, I'm in the mountains of Switzerland. A Swiss person came up and said, I remember when you prayed with the president. That's I like that. That sort of lives beyond just the adventure.
I love it too. And I so admire you for recognizing that even people who are incredibly successful have life, have challenges, have heartbreak, and need something supernatural to empower them. And I think about somebody watching right now who, maybe thinks like, I don't really need God. Like, I'm a tough person. I've got through all these things in my life. I'm fine on my own. What would be your advice for them?
Well, we all are until we're not. And it's the wild as well. Everyone thinks, I see it every day. I take people out all the time. I've been out today, in the mountains. Everyone thinks they're strong until they're not, and life in the wild hits us sideways sometimes. And it tests us, and it asks, what are your foundations in your life? And if the foundations are shaky, we fall down, and myself included. The wild's a very humbling place. So I kind of think it's that lovely quote, a man is never as tall as when he kneels down. I love that, and life humbles all of us, and it's a great journey in life to, why not live empowered? Why not? Well, I want to live empowered. I have many challenges ahead. All of us do in our life, in work, in relationships, in our dreams and aspirations. Just life as a battleground. Why would you not want to be empowered? Why would you not want the gift of finding home and finding peace and being forgiven and being led into light and being that hand in the glove. Why would you not? So I don't know. For me, I don't want to live life without that. It's like, it's like your blood inside you. Try living without it. It's not so fun.
It's so true. The Bible says that he is the breath in our lungs, the very breath in our lungs. And you've done such a great job articulating that genuine relationship with God, not religion, not formality, but actually knowing him and including him in your life. And thanks for being so public about your faith. I know it puts pressure in a different way on you when you do that as someone in your position. And I'm just grateful that you are the communicator and you have the heart that you do. It's been a privilege to chat today.
Take care. All the best.
It hurts every day. Each post feels like a dagger. I thought they were my friends. There's no escape. But thanks to your prayer line, you listened and you cared. I found hope in Jesus.
As we continue through this Holy Week journey, I want to talk about a theme that Jesus returns to again and again in these final days, and that's readiness. Because as the cross drew closer, Jesus didn't slow down. He actually sharpened his message. And one of the clearest things that he emphasized was this: be ready. We see that in Matthew 25. Jesus tells the parable of the 10 virgins, 5 who were wise and 5 who were foolish. They were all waiting for the bridegroom. They all looked prepared on the outside, but only 5 had enough oil for when the moment actually came. And when the bridegroom arrived, the door was shut. And so Jesus ends that parable with a warning in Matthew 25:13. He says, therefore keep watch, because you don't know the day or the hour. Now, that's not meant to create fear. It's actually meant to awaken us, because readiness in the kingdom of God, it's not about appearances. It's actually about our posture. It's about a heart that's awake, it's expectant, and it's aligned with God. And what's interesting is that Jesus doesn't talk about readiness in terms of the future. That's what we always think. He talks about it in terms of how we live right now. We see that in Luke 12:35-36. He says, be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like servants waiting for their master to return. In other words, don't just wait, live ready. He says, live with intention, live with awareness, live like what you believe actually matters, because you know what? It does. And if we're honest, it's so easy to drift. It's easy to become spiritually passive, distracted, comfortable. We all do it. We say, I'll get serious later. I'll deal with that later. I'll step into that calling later. But readiness, it doesn't happen by accident. It's cultivated. It's choosing daily to stay close to God, to stay in his word, to stay sensitive to his voice. Because the danger isn't that we reject God, it's that we slowly grow indifferent. And Jesus is warning us about that. He's saying, don't miss this moment. Don't miss what God is doing. Don't be unprepared when it matters most. And here's the key. Readiness, it's not about perfection. It's actually about attention. It's about a heart that says, God, I'm here. I'm listening, and I'm available. So today, let me ask you this question. Are you ready? Not just for someday, but for today. Are you and I living in a way that reflects what we say and what we believe? Because the invitation of Jesus is not to follow him eventually, it's to follow him now. Peter 1:13 reminds us, therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed. We need to stay alert, we need to stay grounded, and we need to stay ready. As Jesus said in Luke 12:40, you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you don't expect him. Because God is always moving, and the question is always the same. When he does, will we be ready?
what if your favorite hymns held stories you've never heard? In The Origin of Hymns, It Is Well With My Soul, pastor and author Robert J. Morgan takes you into the powerful, untold moments behind the world's most beloved hymns.
For generations, these timeless hymns have lifted hearts and voices. That's why I'm excited to partner with 100 Huntley Street and Crossroads this month to thank you for your continued support of this life-giving ministry. When you understand the story behind a hymn, it changes how you sing it. It becomes personal, a whole new kind of worship. These songs didn't come from comfort. They were born out of real life, out of grief, struggle, and a deep, unshakable faith in God.
With a gift of $50 or more, or when you become a new monthly partner, request your copy. Call 1-800-265-3100 or visit crossroads.ca/hymns.
I think this is so important. You know, sometimes I think when we're younger, we look at those older hymns and we're like,
Yeah, that's for my grandparents.
yeah, but if you actually read them,
Yeah.
they are incredible stories, incredible theology, incredible, like, foundation of faith. Like, it's such an
100%.
encouragement, the thought that people put into it. And a lot of us don't know the stories behind it.
Yeah, well, yesterday I had a chance to sit down with the author, and it was so insightful. And I love what he said. Listen, there's nothing wrong with modern worship. There's nothing wrong with going to church and singing what's been written today. But there's a beauty and a depth in hymns that's not always captured in the songs that we sing today. And he talked about how those hymns, they get us through those dark times. They get us through those difficult times. You know, I mentioned that when my dad was in the final moments of his life, when he was in a coma and he couldn't speak or respond, we started singing in Portuguese some of these hymns to him, and tears came out of his eyes. Oh, wow. I mean, they're so deep and so beautiful. And understanding the stories behind the songs, it's actually really, really, it's not just clever, it's really important to know what was a person going through. Because we know even in modern music that out of pain sometimes, some of the greatest songs that have ever been written. And there's a lot of stories that people don't fully know. And that's why we're so excited to be able to offer this today.
And Robert Morgan, I mean, he's an amazing writer, an amazing storyteller, an amazing communicator. We're so privileged to have him. And this is really our thank you gift to you for your support of this ministry. We couldn't be more grateful for you. And anytime that we have a moment to share a person's lives who has changed, who called the prayer lines or watched the show or saw somebody like Bear Grylls, like this macho guy who depends on God every day and realizes that's what really matters in life. Like, those are the kinds of messages that we know changes culture, but really more than that, changes hearts. And you are part of that. So anything that you can give today would help this ministry continue on strong. We really can't do it without you. We will send this book in the mail to you as our thank you gift. That number is 1-800-265-3100. You can also go online at crossroads.ca/hymns. And thank you. Thank you. We are a team.
Yeah.
I really see it that way, especially, you know, when I go around the world or I just see those impact stories. I feel like, yeah, we're all a team. We're in this together.
Well, and because we're here every day, we get to feature stories like Bear Grylls. You know, you see him on TV and he's hanging out with all these superstars and celebrity. You know, and basically what he's saying is the most important person in his life is not a former president. It's not a former sitting whatever. It's his relationship with Jesus. And his interview and his conversation, and first of all, you did such a wonderful job just kind of leading him, you know, in that conversation. And this week, as we're looking at from the cross to the crown, what a conversation to have. That he took his focus off of, you know, this great adventure outdoors, and he's talking about the great adventure in his heart. And we want you to have that great adventure. And the truth is, it's never too late to say yes to the cross. I mean, I'm going to say it. Everybody knows this verse, but we know it. And I went Old King James, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. And that can be you. You can do it today. You can do it right now. Amen. Sorry.
Thank you for your ongoing support of Crossroads, a supporter-funded nonprofit organization and member of the Canadian Centre for Christian Charities. Thanks to faithful people like you, we are able to continue producing 100 Huntley Street. You can write to Crossroads, P.O. Box 5100, Burlington, Ontario, L7R4M2, or visit crossroads.ca to learn more about our programs.